In this episode, join us in the quest for the stuff that dreams are made of as we celebrate the film noir classic, The Maltese Falcon. Stay with us. Welcome to the 3324 podcast. If you are new, have a seat. We appreciate you checking us out. Stay a while. And if you're returning, welcome back. We've missed you. You can find us on your favorite podcast provider. So please go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. We're also very active on social media. So do us a favor. Give us the follow on Facebook or Instagram at 3324 podcast. It's free, right, Eric? It doesn't cost anything.
That's right.
Right? We're giving away the likes and the follows on Instagram and Facebook. So go do that. And we would appreciate it. So you are here at the 3324 podcast. You found us. I'm Dean behind the microphone. We've also got Eric at the other mic.
Hello. How you doing out there? Let's talk about
no one answered.
No one answered.
No, I didn't hear anybody answer after you said that.
But
they're out there. They're out there. We know it. We know you're out there. We appreciate you tuning in. So here we go. We are doing, I say a lot. I throw that word a lot, classic among classics. Well, this one really is that this defines classic among classics. And if you haven't seen this film, we're really going to strongly make the case for you to see it. And this is the Maltese Falcon. And,
absolutely. I'm just going to apologize right now. If Dean and I gush over this movie, it's because we love it so much. This is one of those movies that we both are totally equal on, no doubt about it. So yeah, here we go. Yeah, let's talk about the Blackbird.
You know what? Let me give, before we get to the Blackbird, let me give you a little prehistory too about how important this film is to me, because we're talking maybe I think 10 years ago. I had originally fooled around with the idea of doing a podcast about films. So we're talking like 2011, maybe 2012, somewhere in there. I think 2011. Fooled around with doing a podcast of my own about films. And so I'm like, okay, I'm just going to kind of record an episode and see how it comes out. This was the movie I chose to do.
Okay.
Now that is in the vault, locked away, because I kind of stopped halfway through, but the Maltese Falcon was the first thing I thought of. And when we were also talking about what kind of content we wanted to do as far as music and movies, and we're throwing out all the chestnuts that everybody knows, Maltese Falcon was like first on the list.
Yeah.
So it still is. So yeah, this is just an amazing film. Film School 101 is in session. So let's get into it.
Yeah.
Came out in 1941. Screenplay written by / directed by John Huston. This would be his first film as a director. Well, he was already an established screenwriter, but an unknown quantity as a director, and that'll come into play a little further down when we talk about casting, right? This is based on the book by Dashiell Hammett, which that book came out in 1930, and there was we'll get to the film versions too. Okay, we'll just stay with the movie. There's so much I want to get into. Nominated for 3 Oscars.
Let's go talk a little bit. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, let's go through this, and then we'll roll through.
Go ahead.
Let's get through all the technical. Yeah, we'll do all the technical specs. Then it'll go off the rails after that. So this is probably going to be the only part that has any structure. Right. Nominated for 3 Oscars: Best Picture, Best Supporting Actor, Sidney Greenstreet, and Best Screenplay. Okay, budget of $375,000, and it made $1.8 million. So that's a decent pocket money. That's a good return on the investment, I think. The cast.
Yep.
I'm just going to go over there's really, in my book, 5 main characters. You have Humphrey Bogart. Okay. And this was really his first A-list, leading starring role. You've got Mary Astor.
That's right.
Who a lot of people may not know. Back then, Mary Astor was a hot commodity, very much in demand. Not someone you hear about too much now when you talk about the Hollywood Golden Age. Peter Laurie and this would be his film debut for Warner Brothers. He had done some other stuff previous to that, and did a lot of work in Germany and then left. Sidney Greenstreet, who at the age of 61 makes his feature film debut in this movie, and what a debut!
Absolutely, he was a theater actor.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah. So he wasn't just like off the street. He wasn't.
No, he's been acting pretty much for quite a while, but this was his first.
Yeah, he wasn't
first thing behind the camera. Yep.
Wasn't a film actor. So he made he came late to the game, but God, I'm so glad he got here when he did.
Yeah.
And then finally, one of my personal favorites is Jerome Cowan, and he plays Miles Archer. He's not in it very much, but Jerome Cowan is one of those guys. If you've watched like TCM, like Turner Classic Movies, or you watch any of that stuff, he's always there. He was in over 100 films, Jerome Cowan, and he's like one of those supporting actors that you just see. Notably, mainly known for this role in Miracle on 34th Street, where he was the prosecutor that was prosecuting Santa in Miracle on 34th Street.
That's right.
Mara. They had the thankless job of going after Santa Claus, and then they called his son, whatever, Mara Jr., and the son comes up to testify. He's like, "Hi, Daddy." So that was
hi, Daddy. Bye, Daddy.
Daddy would never tell a lie. So that was Jerome Cowan.
Right.
He's always in like that kind of those kind of roles, but I just love him. So brief history. So the book came out by Dashiell Hammett with the character Sam Spade in 1930. 1931, they made a film version. So this was the book was well received, and they really just knocked out a film version of it, very close to the book, very faithful. Then in 1936, they took another crack at the film, but they rewrote it, and it was called Satan Met a Lady, and it was with Bette Davis.
It was horrible, absolutely.
But really,
horrible.
It was almost like the Goonies version of like, of Maltese Falcon. Even Bette Davis did not want to do this film. She's like, this is just junk. And they told her, "I'll do this, and we'll give you better stuff." So it was really kind of goofy. They rewrote a lot of the characters. Just really, wasn't even a falcon in it. It was a horn. So you could barely had any DNA shared with it.
It was lighthearted. It was more of a comedy, really. It was, it was just sort of, it got really goofy by the end of it. You're just kind of like, what? It does not resemble the book in any way, shape, or form. Well, third time's a charm, isn't it?
Yeah.
And but let's get back. Getting back to Dashiell Hammett, though. I mean, he had himself had written the story was broken up into like a pulp magazine, and over a course of I think 3 volumes, I believe, and then the finished product came out, but he was a Pinkerton. He was a detective. So a lot of what he wrote in the book was real. Was like the real, what he saw as the real deal. That's why the story is so rich.
And some were based on kind of characters he met during his time there. Some were imaginings of like what private detectives thought they were when they looked in the mirror, but not really.
That's right.
So this is really kind of steeped in. He was steeped in it. So there's no one better to kind of tackle this. And then we come to John Huston, who was kind of knocking around Hollywood as a screenwriter. Did a lot of popular films too. I mean, he wrote a lot of big movies. Finally gets an opportunity to direct a film, and it's the Maltese Falcon. So
I think the job that actually cemented him into doing Maltese Falcon was his work on High Sierra, which was a film that I think was right before Maltese Falcon, and Humphrey Bogart was the lead in that. But he, up to this point, Bogey was playing a lot of heavies. And even in this particular story, he was still a criminal on the lam. But I think what happened was that he wrote such a richness to Bogey's character that you felt sympathy for the guy. He was much deeper than what he was used to playing, usually getting killed off by Cagney or something, in the earlier films. Always.
Bogey and Cagney had a kind of they were like a yin and a yang. I mean, they were even in Oklahoma Kid together, which was like the only like Cagney in a Western. What? Yeah. Cagney was in a Western. Right. One of my favorites, Angels with Dirty Faces. Yep. Where Cagney was then the leading man, and Bogart was kind of minor leaguing as like you said, the heavy or the bad guy to Cagney's even sometimes worse bad guy, but Cagney was the star, and kind of Bogart was just kind of treading. I mean, in 1937, Bogart did like 7 films, but those are all those small roles that you kind of knock out really quick. So
that's right.
Finally, Houston.
And because of like I said, because of High Sierra, I think, he wanted Bogart when he got the job as director for Maltese Falcon. He wanted Bogart in the role, but the studio wanted George Raft.
Yes, and who was George Raft is another one who's not a giant. He's not. He is a giant name back then, but he's not really remembered now. I mean, it's kind of like you think of Bogart, you think of Cagney, you think of Clark Gable, you think of Cary Grant. So many other really bigger names, but George Raft was a leading man, like the guy, like what Bogart would eventually become is what George Raft already was.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And and he turned it down.
He did, and much to, I'm going to do my worst John Huston impression.
Oh boy.
Watch out! Much to his delight, he casted Bogart. With the cigar. Just love like hearing the guy talk. But they became really good friends. Yeah, Huston, and it would be the start of a lasting relationship.
And the reason why George Raft turned it down is because he didn't want to work with a first-time director. He's like, this guy's inexperienced. I'm not going to do it. Yeah. And we talk. It comes up time and time again on this show about those choices and those weird decisions that change history. And this is another one of those. Is George Raft turning down this film, allowing Bogart to really kind of this made him into the leading man that he would become, and this
was his breakout role.
Yeah, and this kind of became the character. Most of his other films kind of took this mold for in one form or another. Yeah. They were able to kind of build off of this performance. So, and Huston, just a little more behind the scenes with Huston. He shot the film in order, which doesn't happen too often, but he over prepared. He basically, kind of storyboard drawings. He had everything ready for his feature film debut as a director, and just was really over prepared, which helped the actors, have a firm grasp on what they were doing, and probably helped him because since he did film it in order, he was just able to go right through the whole script.
That's right. And the script itself, I think it was the because it was so strong and so faithful to the book. It was almost verbatim. Yeah. A lot of lines just came right out of the book. And that was his mandate. He's like, I'm going to film the book.
Yeah.
And he did. It's one of the greatest adaptations of any written source. Yeah. I think, so.
And there's so much to really digest, and even watching it again, I caught even more. It's just like I love it. And then just to wrap up the kind of history part, this did really well, right? Three Academy Award nominations. There was a sequel that was planned in 1942, but it was never made. They never got around to it. And its influence would be felt well into the 70s. There was a movie called The Blackbird. And they would kind of do remakes, and it influenced a lot of films.
Sure. Yep.
And then we'll get to the Ren and Stimpy connection at the end.
Well, let me ask you, how did you first come to Maltese Falcon? When was the first time you?
Oh, later than you. I can tell you that much. Mm-hmm. I can tell you that much. It was one of those ones that was, I was big into, I was like on the Cagney kick.
Yes,
so for me, it was like kind of like Angels with Dirty Faces, and
that's right. Yeah.
Like White Heat and all those types of films, Yankee Doodle Dandy. So anything that Cagney was doing, I was really kind of like focused in on him. So Bogart was there in some of those movies as like the side guy. And then I actually can't tell you. I don't know if I remember exactly when it was, but I maybe I caught it on TCM or something, and I was like, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you hear about the Maltese Falcon, oh yeah, it's one of those movies, but you gotta watch it, And then I got to see it at the Alamo Draft House. They screened it, in the theater, and I was absolutely there. I
Yeah.
was like, I have to see this in the theater, and the people that were there were going wild for it. Like, they came in like ready to watch this. They were laughing and just having a great time with it, and it was such a great experience. But
Yeah.
I think you were
It
before.
is. Oh, I came to it. 3 movies actually got me into it. To be honest, it was a sort of stepping stone. And when you say that this movie had that kind of influence, it Raiders of the Lost Ark, when that came out, profound influence on that movie. And so it introduced me to what's called the MacGuffin in the film, which is the Falcon itself. This the object that they're all searching for. So that's kind of similar to what was going on. And then there was a year later, Blade Runner came out, and I saw that, and that introduced me to this thing called film noir. It was kind of a mashup of sci-fi film noir, but it had that sort of classic detective story feel to it. Filmed it on the back lot where they shot the Maltese Falcon, even so when they made the film. So that's a nice little piece of trivia there. And then the third would be my dad had a copy of The African Queen, which was another Bogart Huston collaboration a little later on, and that earned Bogart's first Academy Award for Best Actor for that film. So I watched that and I fell in love with that story. So, but that was it. I was introduced to Bogart with that movie, but then that's when I got into Casablanca. I watched that.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. I think Casablanca also kind of casts a really big shadow.
Yeah.
Because it is such a big film. It is so much more renowned, and it might, it might be better. I love Casablanca as much, or maybe even more. I'm not sure. Like,
it depends on what mood you're in.
Yeah, they both have a certain sensibility to it that was ahead of its time, and everybody played against Sam, and the post, the image of him and Ingrid Bergman. It's so iconic that I think at that point it's like, well, Maltese Falcon was before that, and it kind of almost took a backseat because he did one up himself with Casablanca. You can't deny that he brought that whole type of character, the disillusioned guy type of thing, and brought it to Casablanca brought it to the next level, and that was the one that everybody remembers him for. So I think kind of he had a bigger film that came out afterwards, and that really casts a lot of shadow.
I think that the thing that makes Casablanca might that level higher for me is just the writing. It has got to be the best written film of all time. God. I mean, the screenplay.
Claude Rains in that film. Oh my God,
the screenplay to that movie, and it's original. It's an original based on an original play. So it's an original source, which I kind of like better than using an adaptation. But again, it depends on your kind of mood too. It's Casablanca is a little bit sentiment to it. There's the love story. There is the patriot.
I'm ready for either one.
But then you got Maltese Falcon, which is a lot more sardonic. It's like and cynical and just sort of hard boiled. But so whatever mood you're in the day, it's like I'll watch both. But it's like
the difference between the two, I think also, which really is what kind of sets Maltese Falcon apart, is pacing.
It's rapid fire.
This is one of the films. And I was thinking about like the opposite. What would the opposite of this be? This is kind of like the opposite of a Quentin Tarantino film. And what I mean by that is, in the Maltese Falcon, there is not one wasted scene. There's not one scene that is there are no scenes in there that have no point. Every scene in that film has a point. You're getting into the scene when something is happening, and you're getting out after it happens, and then you're moving on to the next thing. It's almost like breakneck speed, which keeps you kind of off kilter as well, because there are so many different threads that Sam Spade needs to manage and balance, that it moves so quick that you almost can't. It keeps you kind of a little kind of disoriented of who's doing what he's not playing both sides against the middle. He's playing like 5 sides against the middle, and he has to manage this whole thing.
That's right.
And that's the brilliance of the book, but it's the brilliance of executing that and putting it on film as well, because if you get somebody in the lead who overplays that, it could very much become campy very quickly. But because of Bogart's acting style, which is kind of really low key, and he actually was pretty expressive. He would do a lot with his eyes and his face, and you wouldn't think that. But one of the keys to this movie, I'll tell everybody now, is one of the keys to this movie is you have to watch everybody's expressions, because people are doing things with their eyes and their expressions that they may not have lines in the scene, but there's so much other stuff going on that it's just a delight to watch, because people are giving each other the side eye and looking at this one and
That's
just
right.
giving a little grin or a smirk. There's so much that goes on that this movie just delivers. So, but we're getting ahead as predicted.
And it all takes place indoors. You go from one room to another, just a bunch of people talking. But it's like an action movie, right? The dialogue, I mean, it's so rapid fire. It's almost feels like an action movie, but there hardly is any action in it.
Yeah,
just very little.
The dialogue is electric in this film. It really is.
Yeah.
It's snappy. It's got some of that datedness, but I love that datedness. Like I just love it. It's just
of course,
it's
and
not,
nobody
it's not
writes
corny
like this anymore.
Yeah, it's not corny. It really just moves.
If people try to write like that today, you get that campiness to it.
It comes off as
harkening back to that era. It's definitely of its time, but there's nothing like it, and you can't duplicate it. You just can't.
Yeah, no, absolutely, because there's just so much, and there's so many different relationships. Let's just go. I'm just going to skim through the plot just quickly, because if you haven't seen it, I mean, it's going to get ruined for you no matter what. But we're not going to go through the whole thing like that. But basically, there's Detective Agency Spade and Archer, which Samuel Spade is played by Humphrey Bogart. Miles Archer is played by the great Jerome Cowan. And there's a little bit of there's an underlying issue going on between them. Basically, Bogart was fooling around with his partner's wife. But
he's not a nice guy. Story. Bogart himself, he's
not perfect. It's not that he's a bad guy. He's as fallible as anybody else in this movie. And that's the thing, is this movie is just filled with imperfect people to varying degrees, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of imperfection.
That's right.
Yeah, so they have
I dare say that I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I'm getting a little ahead of myself. No, I dare say that that this movie is he is not used to what he deals with these people is not something that he's always dealt with, probably lowlifes that were probably much easier to deal with in the past. In this movie, I think he's really getting a run for his money with these characters. So we'll talk about that as we.
He absolutely. I mean, it's there, and that's the beauty, is there's so much to manage as a character. So beyond all the different characters he's interacting with, his partner gets killed, so he's got to figure that out, and then this mysterious woman comes into the office, and she's got something to do with it, and then Peter Laurie comes into it as Joel Cairo. It's a whole, and he brings a whole other sensibility to the movie.
See, that's the thing. It's like, right.
Good.
His partner gets killed, but that doesn't seem at the time to be the driving thing for him. He's in the beginning. It's like he doesn't care. Like he's like, he's dead, but that doesn't seem to be what's driving him in this film. It seems to be he's getting involved in something, and he's almost like. He's a detective, but what I find ironic about it is like he does very little detecting in the movie. You don't actually see him going through the procedural of him like looking for clues and things like that. He's getting caught up in this, and he's
he's doing more people managing in this.
Exactly,
just trying to get. He does detect though, because he does it by deception, because he'll. The Mary Astor character, who is eventually her name after like 2 lies, is Bridget O'Shaughnessy. Before that, it was Miss LeBlanc, which should tell you right there that that's a lie. Blank. So he
and
meets
before
her,
that it was Miss Wonderlay.
Miss Wonderly. So
And which when you first see her, that's when they become enamored with her. Wonderley, and then LeBlanc, and then that's interesting.
and then
That's
then you
an
finally
interesting
get her
point.
real name.
That's cool.
So she comes into the office. She needs someone shadowed. Basically, she gives a whole story. I mean, she's the character's a professional liar. There's no end or no end point to the amount of lying that she'll do, and that's one of the interesting things about this character. This is really, I don't want to overuse the word film noir, but this is widely regarded as the first film noir. Film noir. There we go. But this character is just so flawed, but is so used to getting her way through lying that Bogart, despite he sees right through her, and that's one of the great things about it. Despite that, he still does certain things. He still falls in love with her, but he falls in love with her with his eyes open, and she's not used to that because he just, he'll uncover one lie. She'll start a whole other line of lying, and he'll be like, "That's BS as well." And then she goes even another level down, and he just doesn't believe anything. Yet he's still enamored with her, and maybe that's what it is. Is that normally those surface
she
level
thinks
lies
she's got him under her spell, right?
Because that's
she
what
is
she is.
She is the femme fatale. The mold was her. I mean, she was the ultimate femme fatale. Like others were just looking up to her after this film.
Yeah.
Mary Astor is the ultimate femme fatale. I don't think there's anybody that could equal.
She plays
her amount
the damsel. She plays the damsel in distress.
That's right.
Like that's her stock and trade in the movie, and how she would get men to do things for her because she would play on her looks, and she would use that. She would be able to give him a doe-eyed look, and which is what happened to Jerome Cowan's character. He totally got enamored with her. He didn't care about the case. He was like, in the beginning, he was like, "You saw her first, but I said something," is what Miles Archer says, and that's all he was. I mean, if you look at that scene when Mary Astor, when Jerome Cowan comes into the office, Miles Archer, he looks like a Tex Avery wolf, like from the cartoons. He's just like licking his chops. He's eyeballing her. So you have to watch like these characters. He's just, Bogart is, neither one of them are fooled by her, and that's the thing. But Miles is fooled. They're not fooled by her story, but Miles Archer is fooled by her looks, and he's just glossing over everything else and saying, "Well, this is going to be."
That's because because he's normally a ladies' man, so he thinks he can get any woman. So if this is his latest, victim,
conquest.
so to speak. So, but the tables turn on him rather quickly.
Rather quickly. So he ends up getting shot.
Yeah.
That leads to eventually meeting the Peter Laurie character, which is Joel Cairo, which is just one of those iconic. I think he's one of those iconic film characters. He's just there's just something about him when he comes on the screen, and his interactions with Bogart are just electric. It's just, Bogart doesn't even know what to make of him in the beginning. It's like he hands him the Effie, his secretary, hands him the business card, and he goes to he hands it, he holds it, and then he catches a whiff, and she's like, gardenias, and he comes in, and
this is a perfect piece of casting because Peter Laurie is used to playing these rather strange characters and such, but in the book, the character of Joel Cairo is openly homosexual. And of course, with the censorship at the time, they really couldn't play it like that. So they kind of made him a little bit of a dandy. But Laurie, I mean, he sells it. You definitely can tell that he's, there's no denying it, but it's not explicit.
Yeah, because they did have the film, the motion picture film had a code that they enacted. So I believe the first version in 1930 actually did portray that a little bit more. But now that they also wanted to tamp down the drinking. But I think John Huston said you can't with the like Sam Spade's a drinker, like that. You can't have him just not drinking. So there was some things that they had to work around and kind of figure out. But Joel Cairo is just their whole interaction when they're first talking about the bird. And that's the thing is that's where he's doing his detective, though. Detecting is because Spade isn't letting on that he has no clue what Joel Cairo is talking about. And that's being a detective, is just playing along like he knows what he's talking about, because all of a sudden he hears about this black bird. never heard about it up until this point, but totally plays it off. Yeah, you want me to find it? Absolutely. And that's and that's the first time that that Peter Laurie tries to hold him up, wants to search his office, and it's the first of a few beatings that Peter Laurie will get at the hand, and it leads to one of the greatest quotes later on. It's like, because
that's right.
There's a scene later on where Bogart kind of hits him, and Peter Laurie's like, that's the second time you've laid hands on me, and Bogart's like, when you're slapped, you'll take it and like it. When you're
slapped, you'll take it and lay.
And he lays like three rapid fire slaps on him. It's
right on the chin, right?
It's got all this great stuff in it.
So the thing that's funny about that too is like Humphrey Bogart is not a big guy. Okay, in real life, like he wasn't a very tall man, and he's rather thin. So, but when you see him up against Peter Laurie, though, he towers above him.
Like Peter Laurie was tiny, so that's about the only person. Him and Cagney were the only ones who could probably be out height.
Yeah.
So it's just one of this is just one of those films where the casting is spot on, the delivery of the dialogue is just right there. So they go through the whole Joel Cairo thing. We get introduced to another character, which we didn't really go over in the beginning, Wilmer Cook. And he's basically like he's kind of shadowing Bogart and following, and he's kind of like an element of danger that they don't know about yet. They're kind of don't know what his game is, but he's kind of following Bogart. Bogart shakes him off once, but then follows him again. Another, and then Bogart goes to find Joel Cairo after an evening of some police interaction, which is another great scene when the police come to Bogart's house and he won't let him in because he's got Mary Astor and Joel Cairo in the other room. They're all trying to get together, find out who knows what. And then they start fighting.
Mm-hmm.
And the cops come in, and they just have to try and talk their way out of it. And that's one of the scenes where you have to watch everybody's eyes and their expressions, because Bogart is just so.
That's right.
Figuring out what just
he's
so
taking
quick.
It all in.
Yeah, so quick to.
And that's the thing. It's like
the story.
And that's the thing, that there is no story yet, and that's the brilliant thing. She is lying to him so much. He has no idea what's going on, but we're slowly introduced to these characters, and that one by one, a little piece of the story is developing, Yeah.
Because she doesn't give him anything. He finds information. Right. He finds information, then comes and confronts her with it. And then she will come clean a little bit, but then still couch it in lies.
That's right. And she knows Peter Laurie's character. That's a great scene where they're both sitting there and they're talking amongst themselves. And Bogart's just kind of like leaning, that one shot where he's like leaning in, the close up on his face, because he's listening to their conversation. Because obviously there's a lot being revealed through this conversation about the bird and like who's looking for it and that kind of thing. And he's just like, oh, well, yeah, it's great. It's just absolutely.
Yeah, and then there's where the cops are the main detective's like, oh, okay, haul them all in or whatever, and then he gives like a rabbit punch to Bogart, and then Bogart falls back and he's about to go after the lead detective, and Ward Bond, who plays the other detective, is like, no, Sam, no, don't take a swing, because that's exactly what he wants. Because the cops are basically after Bogart, and they allude to it a little bit later on when Bogart goes to see a lawyer or the DA, and he said, you tried to get me my license taken away or whatever once before, and it didn't work. Yeah. All you had was a good laugh. So there's some animosity between certain cops. They kind of don't really like him, and
which is typically the case in a classic noir setting. You always have the detective is somewhat seedy, somewhat shady, and the cops are, and there is that sort of I wouldn't say competition, maybe, I don't know. There's that sort of unhinged, like there is a relationship there, but it's kind of like they don't trust each other. Yeah, kind of thing, which is most of the time, that's why they become private detectives to begin with. They might have been cops at one point, but they come, they do this on their own because they don't want to get tied up with the red tape and all
Yep.
so
yeah. So
yeah.
not only does Bogart have to deal with a woman that he might be in love with that is just lies about everything, has not really told anything.
Yeah.
Then you have mysterious Joel Cairo, who is talking about this blackbird, and then he's also dealing with the cops who know some of the stuff that Bogart has told them lies, and they've been able to prove it. So he's not a reliable source of information to the police. So there's no doubt that why they're going to suspect that he had something to do with his partner's murder, because he is lying to the police, and the police are actually they easily disprove one of his lies.
Mm-hmm.
So he's got a lot that's going on, and all he's trying to do, like Eric said, is he gets new information. He goes back to his client to find out more, and she just does nothing but lie.
And she just
kind of, she's just trying to string it along, and like he said it, he goes, you can't just like hope this all comes out in the end and it all works out, because.
And I don't think at this point, I don't think he's used to this. He's used to being like on top and one step ahead of everyone. And maybe he is, maybe he isn't. We don't know. We are forewarned in the beginning when Effie is telling him, Sam, you sometimes you worry me because you're too slick for your own good. And in this situation, this really starts to play out. Her little warning to him, and because who has the upper hand here? Who we don't know yet. So it's kind of like it's at this point it's so convoluted that you're and that's what keeps you on the edge of your seat is watching these characters just sort of play this out. And
the great thing about this film also is they didn't like just open the floodgates and introduce all these characters. So you get just some time with Mary Astor's character, Bridget O'Shaughnessy.
Right.
You get a really you kind of get some interaction there. Then they bring in Joel Cairo, right? And you get some, then he's got a scene, Bogart has a scene with him, a couple of scenes with him, and then they put the three of them together, right? So they're kind of building on this whole thing. And then there's another interested party that Wilmer Cook, the guy that's been shadowing them, represents, and that's Casper Gutman. And that's played by the great
which we haven't met yet.
We haven't met yet. He's called the Fat Man. Yet. The Fat Man.
And that's in that conversation between her and Joel Cairo. She goes, the Fat Man. And now it's like, okay, now we get a sense that this guy could be pulling the strings. This could, who's this this guy outside the window? Why is he tailing Bogart? Who is he? Who's he working for? We don't know this yet. And this comes out in that conversation that I spoke of, the Fat Man.
Yep.
Who's the Fat Man?
Who's the Fat Man? It's Sidney Greenstreet, because he is a really a tall guy, but he's also a very big man too, and that's what
he's the force to be reckoned with.
He is,
and I say that
he could have been the Kingpin if he was alive now in like a Marvel film. He would be the Kingpin.
Oh, there's no doubt about it that he is the model, the inspiration for Jabba the Hutt. There is no doubt about it that Lucas would admit to this. And the brilliant thing is with the way Houston would put the camera down below so that you're looking up at this guy's like bulk. So he is totally, Jabba he's totally Casper Gutman.
Yeah,
no doubt about it.
Yeah, so
I think I think Lucas even said, he goes, I want to put a fez on top of his head because the character he plays in Casablanca, and that didn't happen.
Ferrari,
yeah. So
so now you get him into the mix, and yeah, like Eric said, he is the driving force. He is the force behind looking for this blackbird. He has been on a quest for years to find it. Finally meets up with Bogart, and they have a conversation, basically tells him the history of it. So we get to find out exactly why this bird is so important, and why the stakes are so high. Why are people getting killed? Because so far 2 people have been killed as a result of all these events. So it's just I love his I love talking to a man who loves talking to a man who loves to talk. He's just such a great.
I can listen to this man talk. Yeah.
He just has a way about him.
And when he's talking to Bogart about the Falcon itself, and he's telling him what it is, I could listen to that for hours.
Yeah.
And he's telling him the entire history of where it came from, what it was, the whole thing. This isn't, school book history, but history nonetheless. And it's not Mr. Wells' history. I love that stuff. It's just the delivery of it is so great.
And
So,
you know what? It kind of, you're talking about Raiders.
Yeah.
It kind of, this, I think they may have taken another part of it too, a little bit when the two FBI agents go to meet Indy and Marcus, and they talk about they kind of give the origin of the Ark. It kind of is like the same type of story a little bit, like they're, kind of telling it in the same way. About the history of the Ark.
There's no doubt that
it's how it passed through time, and the story of the Falcon is the same way.
I kind of get that also from the scene with where Indy is in the cantina with Belloc, the villain, and he's telling him there, there's that exchange. It's very Maltese Falcon right there, so it's. Yeah. He's basically telling Indy, like, you're not any better than I am, just, you think you are, but you're not, kind of thing. And he's given a little bit of this and history. And so there's no doubt that this movie had such a profound influence on Raiders. Yeah,
absolutely. So we get to meet him, and he is basically the money man. He's the guy behind the quest. Worked with Joel Cairo. Wilmer Cook, the guy that's been following Spade, is basically, now we find is like the hired gunman, the gunsel that is kind of just doesn't really say much, but there's another great quote that comes out of it is what is it? I think they're going down the hallway to meet Casper Gutman. I think the first time or the second time. And Wilmer's like, keep on riding me, and they're going to be picking iron out of your liver. I mean, you can't write stuff like that. Is like, and then Spade comes back with the cheaper the crook, the gaudier the patter. So he realized, like, he acknowledges that kind of stuff is just so hokey. Like it's tough guy talk. Right, it's like, they're going to be picking iron out of your liver.
What about the scene What about the scene where he's trailing in the hotel lobby, and he's sitting there, and Bogart just walks right up to him, and he sees him sitting there, and he's just acting like he's like, oh, I know what I'm doing, but he just sees right. Like, he sits down, and he's just like, shove off, because people lose teeth talking like that.
Yeah, it's like so much great. And he calls over. So many quotable lines from this film. That's one of the great things about this too, is just that the screenwriting is just so great and so fitting of this environment, of this. There is nobody that's on any type of high moral ground in this film. So that you kind of getting a feeling for how these people interact with each other. No one is above stabbing somebody else in the back to get what they want. And even Spade, because Spade did it. He fooled around with his partner's wife. So again, there's no equivalencies to be made as far as like who's better than the other. Or everybody has some type of a bad side or a dark side. It's just to what level, And Spade is managing his way through that. And so he meets with Gutman, and really, like Eric said, finds out what the deal is with this and why people are dying over this item, and what's so important about it. So he's still just gathering information and just trying to still figure out where all this fits. Then he gets called, but then he has to go see a lawyer because the lawyer is, kind of bothering him. So there's a scene there where he's just being badgered by the lawyers and just saying, and that we talked about it earlier. It's just kind of like, you tried to get me, my license taken away once before. It didn't work. Come subpoena me if you have something to say, because I'm not saying anything else.
There's definitely a lot of balls in the air. Like, he's juggling a lot of stuff at the same time now, which gives you the impression, like I said, he's not used to this kind of case. I think this is something different. This is something, but I think you could see that he's enjoying it. And hence the scene where the first time he meets Gutman, he breaks the glass and he's like acting all like, you better talk to me, and like because he doesn't want to do business with him, like you're not going to tell me
He
where
comes
the
off as
bird
very
is.
violent. He comes off as
He
very
comes as
violent
and very sort of like like just short
unhinged.
tempered and unhinged, and he walks out of it and he starts to laugh, he starts to smile, but his hand is shaking because of the thrill of it.
Yeah.
He's like getting off on the thrill of this situation, like he's so yeah, the
Yeah, and
adrenaline is going.
that's a very important scene for another reason. So when Bogart meets Gutman for the first time and leaves that apartment after that outburst, right? And he goes up to the elevator and he sees his hand shaking. This is actually the first scene where we get more information than Bogart, because up to this point there was nothing that we were ever told we didn't know anything more than him. We were with him on this journey. We only found out what he found out.
That's right.
In that scene,
yep,
Bogart gets into the elevator. There's two elevators side by side. Bogart gets into one and the other one is opening, and Joel Cairo gets out and is going to see Caspar Gutman. That's the first time that we actually find out more. So it's almost like halfway through the film where we only know as much as the main character, but now we actually start to see that, there's some other things aligning against him also, which I thought was very interesting. I didn't really catch. I was like, oh, well, this is the first time where we really we find out something that the main character didn't, which is, movies that give away too much. I like to go on the trip with the character. I go in dumb and I don't try and figure stuff out. So I always enjoy that. So it was interesting to see it like halfway through. It's like, oh, okay. He missed that.
But now something. We got to see it. Now Now like what's he going? Why is he there? Like what So yeah, like you say, a little bit more of information. The second time he goes to see him, now as he's telling him about the Falcon, and he's going on and on about it, and he's telling him how much it's worth. It's probably my favorite line in the film where he says, do you know what this is? Do you have any idea? And he says, well, I know what it's supposed to look like, and I know the value of human life you people put on it. Like the way he says it so vehemently, like it's just so his mood completely changes. But as they're talking, he's smoking the cigar and he's drinking. And he keeps filling his glass, and then we come to find out that he slipped him a Mickey. He drugs Bogart. I was like, what? Which is, and I just watched it the other night, and it occurred to me. I mean, not to give too much away at this point because I don't think we got there yet, but it occurred to me as to why. I never understood why he drugs him at this point, rather than just outright kill him.
Yeah. Well, he said it. I mean, he said it later. I mean, because Gutman isn't really that guy. I don't think like he has other people do his bidding, but yeah, I think maybe from their point of view, it's
kind of baffling because when you consider that when you consider that Wilmer, who's the Gunsel, had no compunction about killing this other character that we never see. This Floyd Thursby kills him.
He always does the bidding. He does the bidding of Gutman, and you see what later on.
He does
Gutman
the dirty work.
Off. Yeah, but Gutman waves him off. So I think that was at the behest of Gutman. Is like, you know what, we don't need this. We got what we needed. We're just going to move on, and we'll probably be gone anyway. They thought at that point they were going to be making off with it anyway. So it's like, what?
Well, let's talk a little bit more about the plot, and then we'll get back to that because I don't know. I'm kind of, is it a plot hole? I don't know.
I don't think so. Because he said it earlier. He goes, "Why did you?" I mean, later on, he said, "Well, oh, so that's why you slipped me the Mickey because they."
Yeah, but he says he tells him, he goes, "We had no room for you in our plan." Yeah. But it's what you find out at that point, which is important. And let's get to that. Let's talk a little bit more about the plot.
So yeah, well, I mean, pretty much, Spade wakes up and kind of has a a big bump on his head. Kind of tosses the room, trying to find stuff out, get any type of a clue as to where these people went, because he wakes up much later. Finds out that there's this ship that came in. It was in the newspaper. It was circled. He gets there just as the thing is in flames. Yeah. So not he doesn't get much information there. He was kind of trying to figure stuff out. Goes back to his office, and that's when someone comes in who's been fatally wounded, carrying a bundle, carrying a package, and gives it to him and says one word, right? Falcon.
Mm-hmm.
And that person is uncredited. Falcon. Is John Huston's father, Walter Huston, uncredited.
It's Walter Huston. That's right.
Yeah, it's Walter Huston.
Yep.
Yeah, literally in it for like two seconds. He staggers in, drops off the bundle, dies on the couch. So Walter Huston, who was a really big, really famous actor back then as well.
So we come to find out that this guy is the captain of the
Jacoby.
ship. Okay, so he has the Falcon. Okay, why? How does this happen now? Now a little more information now that's being revealed. So now Bogart actually has the Falcon at this point. He has it in his hand. And now he's all, what do we do now? Because in a way he's kind of unnerved because he's like, he doesn't. This is like the scary part. He's like, we actually have this thing. People are going to come looking for this thing.
Yeah. Well, there is one point I want to point out too, though. There is one point that he almost gets overcome with the mania and the greed when they get that bundle and his secretary Effie is there.
We got it.
We got it. And he's he doesn't open it all the way. He kind of makes a hole in it and kind of puts his hand in and feels it. His other hand is grabbing, he's holding Effie's arm. And she's like, Sam, you're hurting me, because he's like squeezing it, so, like there's that almost that look of lust in his eyes, like avarice. I have it,
yep.
I have it now. And then he kind of comes around and kind of
so which is important.
Comes to his senses.
Is it because he physically has the bird, or does he have the upper hand at this point?
I think it's because of everything he was told and the amount of money they were talking about. I think because the fact that she says, "Sam, you're hurting me." He's squeezing her arm so hard that because he's like, the one thing about Spade is his relationship with Effie. Is always, it almost seems like she's kind of in love with him or would be in love with him, but he only ever sees her as like his girl Friday. As the secretary, but he asks her to do like crazy stuff and just puts her in danger as well, but knows he can rely on her. I mean, she's pretty much the only constant in his life, and she's always there. So I think that by him doing that, he was almost caught up in like, we got it. We actually have this thing, and it almost looked for a moment. But
up to this point, it's interesting to note that he went to see Gutman saying that he has the Falcon, knows where it is, but he didn't though. He really, we really, the only thing he had was Mary Astor.
Yeah.
Was Bridget O'Shaughnessy, which really, she wasn't telling him anything, right? He didn't know exactly where the bird was. You come to find out that it was being brought to her by this captain on the ship, right? And this is where my problem is at this point, because they knew about the ship. They knew about the bird being so in a sense, they had the upper hand. They knew more than Bogart did at this point. So that's my question, is why not kill him at this point? Get rid of him. Since they
don't exactly say when. I mean, they allude to it later in the film, right? Because that's when Gutman says, Joel Cairo was looking in the paper and he recognized the name of the ship. So we don't know that didn't happen before, or we don't know exactly when that may have happened.
Mm-hmm.
So again, and I think my assumption is that they're thinking of Sam Spade as just this guy on the periphery. Like, we don't need to kill him. He's not really like that type of a threat. Because like I said, at that point, they thought they were getting the bird and leaving anyway. So that was like, they slipped him the Mickey. They kicked him in the, basically kicked him in the face, and that was it.
But that's the thing. It's like Wilmer, he's like, Spade's always given Wilmer shit, right? He's always giving him, he's ready to kill him. It's surprising to me that he didn't put a bullet in him.
He just keeps, that's the thing. He's at the beck and call of Caspar Gutman. So Gutman had waved him off a few times.
And
so I don't.
Or it could be that he has a respect for Spade, because he does say, like, later on, he goes, "You're a man of resourcefulness, and I could use a man like you in my team."
Or maybe Gutman just doesn't want that stuff going on in front of him or around him. It's like, because he just seems like he's detached from it. He doesn't seem like he's the violent guy. He will, compel other people to do that for him. So it's just kind of like, he kind of gets his hat and they kind of leave. They kind of, well, yeah, we're gonna go get the Falcon. So, so basically, yeah. So Spade's got it. He's got to figure out now. Now it's time to hopefully tie some of these loose ends together. So he just kind of gets the Falcon, basically stows it away. He's sent on a wild goose chase. He thinks that Mary Astor's character is in trouble, but that turned out to be a red herring as well. She was compelled to do that so he could leave, because they knew that the guy had gone to the office with the Falcon and they were going to get it, but it was already gone by then. So basically they come back to his apartment. Bogart comes back with Mary Astor to his apartment after all this, and Gutman, Joel Cairo, and Wilmer Cook are waiting.
And they're all waiting for him.
They're all waiting for him.
And he takes the Falcon and he deposits it in a post box at the train station, or the bus station,
like a
whatever.
package handling area for like a bus depot or something. Yeah, like a check.
And he checks it. So he checks it so that it's in hiding. So he knows exactly where it's at. And he goes back to his apartment, and they're all waiting for him.
We can't go through this whole scene, but it's probably the highlight of the film. Is you've got all these characters in one room now. Finally, like you've got everybody that is a major player in this film, and just Bogart managing Mary Astor, managing Gutman, managing Joel Cairo, and managing Wilmer all at the same time. Like just and sometimes playing certain characters against each other to kind of take one off the board, right? To take one off the table. It's just some masterful writing. I mean, it's just, and none of it seems far-fetched either, because these people are just so like in that level of betraying each other and backstabbing that you really don't think twice that these people would do it. It doesn't seem so far-fetched to me. There's just so many.
And it's
great
like you say with the faces. There's just so much. There's so much going on in this scene, in this sort of climactic confrontation. Yeah, there's just the watch everybody's eyes, watch everybody's facial expression.
Yeah, because this is
so much happening there.
This is where you get to Bogart kind of saying, "Okay, I have the Falcon. Let's do the money. We need a fall guy. I need to find out the whole story." Like this is really where everything is he's trying to tie up everything, because he's got everybody in one room. So he just wants to get, at this point, he does want to just kind of get rid of it and get his money, but not really, because he's been, he's had that ulterior motive of he still hasn't forgotten that someone killed his partner in the beginning too. And that's good. That will ultimately come back to it, where that we kind of forget, because there's so many other things. A couple of other people get killed on the way. So you really, you get caught up in the story of the Falcon, but you really forget what the primary driver of it was, is that his partner was killed, and he was trying to investigate that and figure out what that was.
That's right.
All these other things kind of happened to him. Like this case kind of happened to him, with the arrival of Joel Cairo and talking about the bird, and he didn't know anything about it, and kind of bluffed his way through it to this point. And
it's like you say, it's like he gets caught up in it, and you think that he's gonna, like, he's involved now. He's with these people. He's just as greedy, and he wants it for himself, and you really don't know his intentions at this point. Like,
because they've made all the arrangements. They've kind of worked out most of the finances. He's taken some money for it. He's taken an advance payment on it.
Promised more money.
They're all kind of waiting. They decided that Wilmer is, someone has to go to the cops. Like the cops have to have somebody. So they eventually decide that Wilmer is going to be the one. And another great quote comes from there about you've been like a son to me, but you can always get another son, but there's only one Maltese Falcon. which is it's like, wow, nice. I thought it was your son.
That's right. That's right.
It's like, well, you can always get another son, but there's only one Maltese Falcon. So I'm like, wow, that's just harsh.
Because Bogart needs one of the things that he wanted to get the police off their back was they needed a fall guy at this point. They needed to literally sacrifice somebody to take the rap for all the murders and that kind of. And he actually did the killing, so it was for him. It was a no-brainer. But there's this whole big thing, and then it just the greed just gets to him. He's like, yeah, we don't need him. He's
he turns
expendable.
Out to be dispensable. Exactly.
That's right.
Because the Falcon is now finally within Caspar Gutman's grasp, and
that's right.
And Bogart makes the call. They decide everybody should stay with each other until this is done, and daylight comes. So Bogart calls Effie, his secretary, and tells her where, what to do. Go to the post, go to our box, get the envelope, and get the package. And
we're all waiting with bated breath. And this is literally we're watching a scene where they're sitting around drinking coffee, waiting for the sun to come
reading
up.
Reading a book. Yeah,
it's
Gutman's
so
reading a book. Someone's sleeping.
It's so natural, but we're literally sitting on the edge of our seats, waiting for what's going to happen at this point.
And
right?
we're in the room. We're in the room with them. We are in that room with them. Like while they're it's like we have a spot in that room because the camera doesn't move. The camera doesn't really get like reverse angles and back and like that kind of stuff, which is kind of interesting. It kind of puts us in the room and doesn't really move. It does close-ups, but it doesn't do any reverse angles for the most part or at all. Like you never see anything over Joel Cairo's shoulder, what his point of view is. Everything is kind of put out almost like a stage production at this point.
On display, where
it's like a set. And we have our place that we're sitting in that room, and then everything happens. For the most part, there are a lot of close-ups and stuff, but not a lot of like reverse angles. So the package comes, and they get it on the table. They're clearing stuff off the table like crazy. Like they're throwing everything off the table.
It's like
yeah, they're just like clearing this thing off, and they put this thing on the table. It makes like a thud. It's like, dude.
It's heavy. Yeah.
Now, something I noticed on my last watching is that now how they set the shot up is Bogart is standing on one side of the, they have this desk or this table, and Bogart is standing on one side closest to the camera.
Yeah.
And then what you have on the other side of the table is Joel Cairo, Mary Astor's character, Bridget O'Shaughnessy, and Caspar Gutman. Which is that table is kind of telegraphing. It's creating a separation because Mary Astor is now back on just standing as plain as day with the bad guys, and they're not pushing her away. Like after everything they've been through and all the deception, she is the three like worst people in the film are all standing together, and Bogart's on the other side of the table, which is kind of a little tell, but Gutman rips that thing open, and he finally stands it up. And what I didn't notice I never noticed it in the back. I never noticed Wilmer in the back, where you actually see him like in the back, and then you see him kind of moving over. I always wondered. I was like, how did he? It turns out Wilmer like runs out of there because they're all like focused on this, and I never noticed that he was in the back of those scenes because I was so keyed in on the Falcon and them ripping it open.
That's
and he's kind of in the back, and he slowly like leaves the frame like to go out the front door, and I never noticed it until like my last.
That's right.
Watching.
You see him stir. You see him becoming awake, and it's like what but he doesn't say anything, and then
he's like he's standing up behind them in that scene, and then he slowly like leaves to the right.
That's right.
But I didn't even notice it. I'm like, how did he get out of there? And no one noticed. They show him leaving. So they get this Falcon upright, and Caspar Gutman takes out like just this little like knife, like a little X-Acto knife, and should kind of, because it's been coated. The Falcon is encrusted. It's gold encrusted with diamonds and all this jewels, but it's got a black lacquer coating on it.
Yeah.
So he starts cutting away at it to make sure that it's real, and he's slicing pieces of the Falcon away. And one of the famous lines, it's lead. It's a fake. It's a phony.
Mm-hmm.
So it turns out that it is a fake. And you get one of the greatest outbursts in film history from Peter Laurie. And 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 this is the if you want to know where Ren and Stimpy, if you're a Ren and Stimpy fan from Nickelodeon, and Ren and Stimpy are really based on two specific characters. Stimpy the cat is really based on Larry Fine from the Three Stooges. Basically, that's who that is. And Ren is Peter Laurie in this scene, where he called, fat, bloated, idiot, stupid. Like if you watch Ren and Stimpy, that's where this came from. It came from this scene.
You stupid fathead, you.
you bungled it. You just.
You bloated idiot.
and then he just kind of turns around and starts crying and goes cries on the seat. It's just like such a.
He's like a child.
He's like a child, and Gutman isn't really affected. Like Gutman's like whatever. Like okay, he's like okay, like he recovers pretty quickly. Gutman's like all right.
This isn't the first time. This isn't the first upset.
For him, this is a marathon and not a sprint. He's like okay, this is just another road bump on the way. We got to go to Istanbul. We got to get going there then, and that's where we need to find the guy that originally had it, because obviously he made this fake. So he has the original one. And that's when Gutman invites, Bogart, Sam Spade. He's like, we could use a man of your abilities with us. Would you like to undertake the Istanbul Expedition? Like, no. Which sounds exciting in and of itself. It sounds like, the Istanbul Expedition. I'm like, wow.
It's interesting to point out that, of course, he takes the money back at gunpoint. He takes the money that he gave to Bogart. Bogart takes $1,000 out of it. And he's like, this will cover my time and expenses. And
that's a great scene too, because you never see Sidney Greenstreet has always been a man of just words and verbal sparring. And that's the great thing is Bogart can do the physical stuff when he's kind of subduing Wilmer Cook, but he can also verbally spar with Sidney Greenstreet, with Caspar Gutman. And that's what Gutman really appreciates about him. But you see one of the great scenes here when he does, Gutman says, I'm going to need that $10,000 back. And Bogart's like, well, no, that's your problem. I did what I was supposed to do. And there's that one like flip with his hands. Like he puts his derby on with one hand and lifts up a gun hand with the other. In one shot, he's like putting his hat on and his other hand has a gun and says, I'll take, you'll give me the whole thing. I just love that.
It's sleight of hand. It's you're watching him put his hat on, but then and
he's got the gun. That's right. Yeah, and then the other hand has the gun. It's just so brilliant. Like just all these little things make up something bigger. It's just these little pieces of those little motions and the looks and some of a smirk or all these just make up for the whole thing. So the three. Gutman, Wilmer's on the run, so Gutman and Cairo decide to undertake the Istanbul Expedition. So he says, Gutman kind of leaves, like gives a wave, like ta-ta, like we're heading out.
And then he tells
nothing ever happened.
And for you, Miss O'Shaughnessy, I'll leave you the fake bird. You can have the
So they leave.
Poor thing.
They leave it behind. Hell.
Yeah.
So now they're out of there, and now we're really coming to the true climax of the film. So this you kind of get two climaxes. You get the climax of the Falcon story, and you get the climax of those characters of Gutman and Cairo and what they're going to do. Now it's time to really tie up the end of the movie and avenge his partner's death. Mm-hmm. So he really goes in and confronts Mary Astor's character, and she tries to lie her way through again, and there's no time for this. Now he's really in really high pressure mode. Mm-hmm. The cops are coming. He's obviously not going to get the bird. The money is gone, so it's time just to kind of finish the whole thing out.
And he literally has minutes just to figure this out, to just come, to reveal everything that he knows, that he's been, like you say, he's been taking it all in this whole time, reading everybody, gathering information. Yeah. And it just comes out in a flood, like a floodgate.
And again, from the beginning, he's known that she was a liar, and he knew all this going in, but still has feelings for her. Mm-hmm. But that comes to a head also because what makes him decide not to help her is that he acknowledges that to her. He said, you banked on that. You banked on me falling in love with you, just like, and I'm not going to walk in the shoes of all these other people that you did this to. And if you get away, and if I let you get away with this, you're going to have, I don't know that you're ever not going to shoot me, or that I've got something on you that you're going to try and do me in or whatever. So he really does kind of rationalize it. And then he says, on the other hand, I might love you and you might love me, like that, but it's not really a decision for him. It's he doesn't seem too conflicted. And then one of the famous quotes in this movie is, someone kills your partner, you got to do something about it. Bad for business, bad all around. So there's just so many iconic quotes in this movie.
That's interesting to me, is that there is there's a brotherhood between detectives, and it's like, the police force. And so even with private detectives, there's a code that you don't, his line you don't cross. I mean, he could sleep with his wife, he could do it. There's all this other dirty-handed stuff, but at the end of the day, they do need to stick together in a situation. And if one gets killed, you got to find out why. And it's important, because it is bad for business. It is bad. You don't want a bad reputation in this business.
Bad for business, bad all around.
That's right. And this comes from Dashiell Hammett, who, as a Pinkerton, this is where that reality comes into play.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So the cops come, and he pretty much, he had called the cops and said, hey, these are the people you got to look out for. And he also did give Wilmer Cook some props there, because he said, watch out when you go up against the kid. And then Tom, the detective, said something on the phone, which you don't hear, but then Bogart says, very. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking that Tom said, is he dangerous? And Bogart said, very, because Wilmer did killed two people, and he set a ship on fire. So even though Bogart makes like short work of him, it doesn't mean that this guy's not a psycho, because he is kind of a psycho. Yeah. So he's just warning him, hey, listen, when you go up against this guy, just be careful. Maybe he got lucky. Maybe Bogart got lucky. So anyway, so they get those three do get rounded up. We hear about that off screen, that you got them. Yeah, we got them. So they caught them. And now then Bogart says, here's one more for you. Mm-hmm. And gives her up. And he actually gets her jacket, but gives it to the detective. He does not put the jacket on her. The cop puts her fur or whatever over her shoulders.
Because he won't give her that last.
And she doesn't even look at him. She doesn't even, from that point on, she actually doesn't even look at him anymore. And I think that goes to her cold-heartedness too. Is that, what she, this was the one that she couldn't break, like couldn't get to bend to her will. Almost in shock, like, I can't believe it, because all these other people, this is basically how I lived my life. So then Sam grabs the Falcon off the table. They bring out this is another classic ending line, is Mary Astor goes into the elevator, and they bring her down, and Bogart is with Tom Polhouse, the other detective, and Tom's like, what is that?
And he goes, it's the stuff this was a line that Bogart himself improvised. He took it from The Tempest, from Shakespeare, and it's the stuff that dreams are made of. Interestingly enough, that is not the last word spoken in the film. It's Polhouse says, huh? That is the last bit of dialogue.
What?
Which to me says everything. Like, huh? What? What are you talking about? Like, this, to me, just this whole mess is like, it's summed up in that one little reaction from this befuddled detective. He's what? Yeah,
because he had no inkling as to everything that happened. All this to the cops. All it was his Bogart's partner was murdered. I mean, that's what they were really investigating for the most part. And then the murder of Floyd Thursby. Mm-hmm. I mean, things escalated from there, but this whole other subplot of the bird and the Falcon, Bogart was managing that on his own, because he needed to keep the cops away so he could get that figured out, because he didn't want the cops getting involved in that and bungling it or just making it worse for him. So there's this whole other thing. Like, he's keeping the cops at arm's length while he's dealing with this whole other like strange situation. And it's funny, in the very beginning of the film, there's like a crawl, and it talks about the Falcon, right? In the very beginning. And it says, I think the last line of it is and they tell you the story right there. They said, I think it says, and no one knows its whereabouts.
Yeah, it remains a mystery to this
Remains
day.
a mystery. They told you right there. Like, it's still, they basically gave the film away in the beginning and said it remains a mystery, because you thought it was going to get resolved, this mystery, and it actually doesn't.
But that's the thing. It's like, you start to wonder, does it exist at all?
I always thought, honestly, my opinion, I always thought that in my mind that actually was the Falcon, and that it was under there, and that because they said about how many times it got like a lacquer coat and Blackstone or whatever. Like, I was thinking, well, what if they have it and they don't even realize, and they just thought that, because he cut through and he didn't maybe he didn't go down far enough, that it was there.
That could be.
So that was always my thing. I always thought, well, wouldn't it be ironic if it was actually that? If it was, they did have it, but they didn't realize it because they just thought it was fake.
Yeah, so, to me, it's like I think it could be just that classic metaphor for we're just chasing dreams and it just never comes true, and it's
classic red herring, right?
And we're willing to do step on each other and to do these nasty deeds to one another, and it shows the humanity with lack of, I should say, just for this thing, and it's, well, it plays well. This is a movie that I think would play very well today, because it is so cynical. And so, like, it's, looking at life, we've become, as a society, so much more cynical today, that I think this movie would play very well today, as opposed to something like Casablanca, which is a bit more sort of patriotic and more sentimental, kind of thing. So
I think it plays well too, just because of the breakneck pace that it's at too. It's not it's not one of those melodramas from the 40s. It's kind of, right. The movie starts and it doesn't stop. Like I said, you really don't have time to breathe. There's no scene of just him sitting there, drinking a scotch and reading the newspaper. Like, there's one thing happens and it gets you out and you get some information. He goes to another scene. It gives you a different perspective on something or something else that he's managing, and you get out of that scene. And then it goes into the next. There's not wasted lines in this film. Everything, a place for everything and everything in its place in this film. Right?
It's a testament to John Huston. He's very, very, he knew exactly what he wanted to do. This guy is one of those breed of directors who was larger than life anyway. He was very much like Marion Cooper, and these guys were like, they fought in wars. They were all over. They went to Africa. They did this. They were pilots. They were whatever. So living life to the fullest, and working hard and playing hard is what they did. And they heavy drinker, smoker, all this stuff, but a very intelligent man, a very learned man, a very well-read man, because a lot of his films would be adaptations of literature, and not big literature like Moby Dick might have been the biggest, but like books that were just these odd little stories, like The Treasure of the Sierra Madre and The African Queen.
And he would direct those classics too.
That's right.
And then he would do my favorite role was an acting role. He was the lawgiver in Battle for the Planet of the Apes.
That's right, he was. And he was also the voice of Gandalf
in the Lord of the Rings.
In the Lord of the Rings, the Ralph Bakshi. Yeah. That's right. And
but he was the lawgiver at the very end of Battle of the Planet of the Apes. He kind of finished out the story there. So just to tie this up, there is a relatively recent film that when I saw it, it had Maltese Falcon written all over it. So if you want to see kind of a modern version of it, I didn't pull it up, so I don't know what year it's from, but it's very easily found. It's called Brick.
Mm-hmm. I think it came out in was it 2002, I think?
That far away?
I think so.
So it was Rian Johnson, who now is much maligned for directing Last Jedi in the Star Wars saga. This was like his first film. And if you want to see like a modern adaptation of Maltese Falcon, go check out Brick. It's got the same type of snappy dialogue. The structure is very much the same. Even to the Wilmer Cook character, they got this guy that's just a psycho, just keeps punching people.
And they reference Maltese Falcon as well. They actually talk about the film in this movie.
Yeah, so it definitely wears its heart on its sleeve and its influence. When I watched it, I'm like, oh my God, does anybody realize that this is the Maltese Falcon? Like, I didn't think people got it because it takes place in it's a high school movie.
It's seen through the eyes of high school kids.
Yeah, it's almost like
bizarre.
It's almost like Encyclopedia Brown meets Maltese Falcon, right?
That's right.
And you get Brick. It's like right. He's like a high school detective, and he there's this underbelly of criminal activity, and he's working it, and he's trying to keep in this case, he's trying to keep the principal at bay instead of the police. He's like, feeding stuff to the principal, and he's got this person that gets information for it. It's just really well done. So if you want to see something kind of recent, check that out. But oh man,
but the influence of this movie is unparalleled. It has been referenced, it has been copied, it has been to no end. I mean, every film noir after, I mean, there's been some great ones, Big Sleep and Asphalt Jungle, which Huston also directed. But this, I don't know, it kind of set the standard, and I don't think there's ever been a film quite like it. And it's just like you say, it's perfection in my book. It's, so
it is. It's an easy watch. And you just get drawn in because it's not there's not really, maybe Mary Astor comes closest to really over the top acting. But everything else just kind of fits, and it's got that mysterious, it's just got that smoky look to it, and everything's always dark out for the most part. There's a couple scenes during the day, but for the most part, things are happening at night, or like Eric said, indoors. So you don't get it's hard to get a feeling for how much time is elapsing. They talk about it brief. They'll say a day or two ago, or night, or the morning before, but it keeps you disoriented in that way too, that you're not sure how much time is passing when this is happening, because everything's happening so quick.
I think in the book it takes place in a matter of a week, I do believe, and it's like 1929 or something like that. So obviously it's a different time frame as well. Yep. But yeah, it's a bona fide classic. It defines the word classic in my book, as far as
absolutely.
So,
80 years young.
80 years young this year. That's right.
So absolutely see this film. You have to see this film. Mm-hmm. That's all we can say about it. And then, if you want a nice double feature, you're not going to go wrong with this and Casablanca, because you're going to get just two. I'm sure we'll get to Casablanca somewhere down the road. We need to come down from Maltese Falcon and like kind of calm down and get the blood pressure normalized. Do some music episodes, and then we could go to Casablanca.
Look this film up on any every critic will love it. It scored 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. It is every critic loved it. It is widely considered to be one of the greatest films of all time.
Yeah, this is absolutely one for the ages. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think hopefully we didn't go too far off the rails. Hopefully it made some sense, enough sense that you'll want to go check it out. But you're not going to get dialogue, cinematography, acting. It's all there, and you're getting some heavyweights literally in Sidney Greenstreet, but heavyweights also in Humphrey Bogart. This really shot him out of the rocket. He was a bit player before this for the most part. Mm-hmm. You want to see a star-making performance, it's this one. It's Maltese Falcon. So That's going to do it for us for the 3324 podcast. We thank you, as always, for taking the trip with us. You'll be able to find us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, at 3324 podcast. For Eric, you've been hanging out with Eric, and you've been hanging out with Dean. We appreciate it. And we always ask that you just please be kind and rewind.